Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's ForSpace. Thank you for joining us for today's event, Zone Grises, the journey from researcher to innovation leader. And this is our third episode with V1, Becoming a Scientific Entrepreneur. Now, to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from ForSpace, and we are located on unceded Indigenous lands in Chichage, Montreal. And here at ForSpace, we work with our university community to mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities, events that examine research questions, projects, things in development here at the university. We're running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting also, so we welcome any comments, questions in the chat. We'll try and get those to our panelists. And anyone in the audience, if you'd like to participate, just let us know and raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Now, with that, it's very much my pleasure to hand it to the V1 Studio Marketing and Partnerships Manager, Terry Harris. Terry, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Douglas. Hello, bonjour, everyone, and welcome to Zone Grises, the journey from researcher to innovation leader. What a pleasure it is to be among you today, watching us live in person and online. Thanks for being here and for participating in this force field of the safe space that we're creating together as we travel along our individual journeys, collaborating with fellow travelers who are seeking to change the world and have an impact. Today on the program, you'll get to meet some very smart people working on some terribly interesting problems, from cybersecurity to heating and cooling systems to figuring out how to better feed our planet. Wow, what a lineup. And on top of it, we'll have a co-host anchoring the show. You know, I get a warm and fuzzy feeling every time I get to speak with innovators. It's a true privilege to be documenting these stories of courage and daring, people risking it all to solve the world's problems, and at the very least, solve a problem in the marketplace, one which could benefit from an innovative solution. You know, I tell people all the time at V1 Studio, what we do is help graduate students and researchers become founders. But what does that really mean? It could be simply exploring entrepreneurial concepts, soft skills, and networking, all critical to personal growth and development that align with V1 Studio's human-centric values. Or it could be as a knowledge broker, pointing people in the right direction to get the resources and support they need as they validate their research projects and eventually their business plans to anchor them in a market need, a problem to be solved. It could also be to help transform their research projects into fully fledged startups. And as we'll discuss later on with our executive director, Diana Jorge, who will be our first guest on today's program and our co-host for the occasion. So our aspirations for Zone Grises is to be like a mirror, reflecting the light, your work, your struggles, your knowledge, and shine it back to you at the greater community of graduate students, researchers, the academic and entrepreneurial ecosystems, to enable us all to benefit from the learning that you've had along your journeys. You know, Montreal has for thousands of years been a place of gathering by First Nations people from across the continent to meet, learn, and dialogue with each other. And today we honor this tradition. We gather and share, dialogue, and learn from each other. And that keeps our mission clear because there's a lot of learning and inner exploration all of us have to do if we are to face the challenges and seize the opportunities in front of us. So this episode is called Becoming a Scientific Entrepreneur. En français, devenir un entrepreneur scientifique. Puis vous savez, dans les derniers épisodes, nous avons lancé un nouveau programme et on a appris à connaître des personnes qui accompagnent ceux qui prennent le pèlerinage de l'académie vers l'entrepreneuriat. Aujourd'hui, nous avons la chance de parler à des gens qui sont en cours de traverser d'un monde à un autre monde. And there is drama, and there is doubts, and there are struggles. And we see people in vulnerable positions as they try to learn a new language in a new world. It can be extremely hard mentally on us and on our support system, which accompanies us on these journeys. But the mirror doesn't lie. And from sticking to it, from being vulnerable, from allowing ourselves to open up and collaborate, to share ideas, stems like a phoenix rising from the fire, a new creature, one that is brave, fearless, and bold enough to look at market or societal problems and say, hey, I've got something here and it addresses that problem. And come heck or high water, I'm getting it out there. And it's the potential for impact, the potential for change, the leap of faith that we take when we cross the Rubicon over to the entrepreneurial world that drives us, all of us, to get up in the morning and face the challenges of the day. And if we are wrong and if we fail, that's okay. The worst thing that can happen is we learn something. Maybe we spent a bit of money, but boy, that experience of failure helps shape us into the people that we want to see in the mirror, people that we can be proud of. So are you ready to hear some stories about people taking this journey? All right, so let's go. So as mentioned, we have a special episode today with a co-host who will be interviewing our scientific entrepreneurs on the program. Let's give a warm welcome to Diana Jorge, Executive Director at V1 Studio.
Hello. Oh,
Hello, Diana.
how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very good. Excited.
Excited and excellent to have you here again. And today we have a chance to speak in the language of Shakespeare. Last time we were speaking in the language of Molière. But we wanted to be sure that we're going to talk about this new program that we have, this rebirth that we have right now, something called the Scientific and Innovative Venture Program. But before we get into that, perhaps, Diana, you can tell us a bit about your journey and what led you to your current position at V1 Studio.
Yeah, the very moving around constantly, very much not a straight journey, I would say, in V1. So just to start, like my background is actually in design, industrial design. I've been very, very happy that I moved to Quebec around 16 years now, actually, so well, my home. And I got to explore this mix between, I'm going to say technology, but arts. That's what industrial design is really, is like, how do we approach it in a different way so we can solve problems? So very much problem solving oriented. And I think that slowly took me into somehow work in corporate, develop products, but then get into entrepreneurial world. When I was at Concordia, I found D3. And I was quite curious, coming from a fine arts background. It's like, hey, what is this world? This sounds cool. Working with other people from other backgrounds, interesting. And it took me into this road, into slowly seeing D3 from the point of view of a student, then later the point of view of a startup, because I got through the programs with the people that I work for, one of the startups, like Deep Tech, a startup at the time. Then I worked at D3 as an incubator, as part of the team itself, developing programs, supporting startups, helping them in their entrepreneurial journey. And I got more and more in depth into scientific entrepreneurship. It just kind of like, it started to become a thing. Nice. Got the chance to do my MBA, came back, and it's like, hey, we need to create an environment where scientific entrepreneurship can be an actual thing that everyone knows. What is happening in the ecosystem and what can we create to unlock that internal power that we know we have in research? Carte blanche. Go have fun. Let's figure it out. And that's how V1 came in.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's and we should mention District 3. It is the incubation hub at Concordia University. Yeah. It's been around for a few years. And so V1 came in with a specific problem that it wanted to solve. Tell us, for those who don't know, what is V1 Studio?
So V1 Studio, it's a nonprofit organization. We have a Quebec and Canada mandate, actually work at both levels. And our goal is really our mission is to create opportunities and touch points with entrepreneurship for students in second cycles, third cycles, researchers. Why? Because we really believe that entrepreneurship can actually solve a lot of the big problems that we have worldwide. We know there is a lot of challenges that we have, and a lot of those solutions are coming from research, but there is still a disconnect in those ecosystems. So how can we create that bridge so it's easier and we can accelerate those journeys and create a safer space as well? Another problem that we're having, and this is kind of why, is like we have more and more every year PhDs are graduating, well, getting their diplomas. We don't have enough positions in academia. And it's interesting how the trend is happening. And then we have all of these extremely bright people that have created knowledges, have developed their skills, and they ended up going into the future of the careers with no prospects. They don't know what's happening. Did I wasted my time? Like, what is the point of all of this? So a lot of frustration.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you know what? If we're talking about how can we enable innovation, and then we have this pool of talent that are interested in doing something and having an impact, then we can find a mix and we can solve both problems at the same time. So I know V1, we're tackling huge problems. So for me, it's like society-wide and culture change problems. And I'm excited to, to take on challenges like that.
Yeah, definitely a fearless leader, and definitely it's a roller coaster ride as we navigate between the different universities and all the structures that are in place. And these are real sort of ingrained systems that have been there for decades. And now we're saying that there's enough of a need in the market that there needs to be more innovation that's coming out and attacking these problems, that's disrupting these issues. And that sort of was the creation of the scientific venture program version 1.0, which is now being sunsetted and turning into something new. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what's different about the new scientific entrepreneurship and the new scientific venture and innovative entrepreneurship program.
So let's start. Maybe I'll mention that this was the vision of the president, the VP research at Concordia. Was like, we can create something unique. We have to create these paths. Let's make it happen. And for that, you need a strong partner. Like us as V1s, like we need a university that says, you know what, we're willing to take the risk. What does this look like? So we were very, very privileged to actually go and explore. And as you said, like there is structures already set in place and culture already set in place in the universities. So navigating those, you actually need to have a vision to be able to solve all of those problems and obstacles, and for us to learn so we can then implement it, which is now what we're doing across other universities as well. And that was always the vision from the beginning. As Concordia, a citizen of Quebec, the world is like, this is our mission to help other universities so we can change together the culture. So what is the main difference? So as I mentioned, like now we're expanding, which is super exciting for us and provides a lot of opportunities to create not only like a network, a local network of researchers working in big problems, but now pan-Québécois mission, like a Quebec-wide, province-wide, and set it up Quebec as this stage for scientific entrepreneurship and supporting other provinces as well in the knowledge that we're creating here. For a researcher coming in, that means, again, that connection, opportunity to work with the different universities, participant universities, a pilot. So we're going to see how it goes. I'm very excited about those conversations, trailblazers, let's go. But we've got a lot of interest, so we're very excited.
Yeah, definitely. And then program is, so now it's going to be opened up, from my understandings, to the humanities as well.
Yes.
You're going to be able to take the program, not having to come to Concordia, but if you want to stay in Sherbrooke, or if you want to stay at UDM or at UQAM or any of the other sort of participating universities, because we still have to actualize those milieux d'accueil, those hosting environments. Maybe you can give us a little bit about what does the scientific and innovative venture program have to offer exactly?
Yeah, so it comes with funding, like a runway, $50K moving forward as of March for this new cohort coming in. It provides access with the negotiations that we're going to do of the labs across Quebec. What I want to make it clear as well, it's not a program that is going to be in person all the time. We're not forcing people to move to Montreal. And I think that's an important thing. We do appreciate the locality and the specialties in each university, and we want to keep that knowledge there. So that's one of our missions as V1, is kind of how can we support the regions as well and make sure that we're democratizing entrepreneurship and access to resources too. So we're working very, very closely with the different local ecosystems to make it happen as well.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that we're not launching alone at V1 Studio. We have some partners who are with us. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about the partners and about what V1's role is going to be exactly in the program.
Yeah, so I always like to describe it like we're giving an extra level of love. Like just because we don't want to replace incubators, we don't want to replace accelerators. They're doing amazing work. There is already a lot of frameworks that have been established. For us, it's more like, what else can we provide so there is less anxiety coming from entrepreneurship? Like we kind of put a little bit of a lamp into, this is where you're going for. We're going to be with you, like a consistency, because there's a lot of programs and it's very hard to get lost. So we just want to be that consistency, at least in the first 2 years when they're going through that journey too. And I like also to say because we have so many partners. So we have Axelis, FRQ, MyTax that are partnering with us for this program. But we also are working with the universities themselves, the centres d'entrepreneuriat, like entrepreneurial centers, the incubators. It's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna play kind of like that airplane controller. How do you call it? Like the
Air
control
traffic
air
controller?
traffic controller? Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like there's so many things going on. You have your researchers trying to find their way. It's like, okay, don't worry, I'll put you in contact with him. I'm sure it's the right place, or them, like the right place to land. That's what we're doing. We're making sure that all of those planes, we're watching what's happening in the ecosystem, connecting all of those players so we become a team. Because that's also something that we notice is like, we've been learning a lot in the past 2 years, and there is disconnects when we see a lot of entrepreneurial tourism. What we call is like you jump from one incubator to another, but then people don't talk to each other, and that can be problematic because we can be giving different feedback, and then the startup is like, I don't know what to do. So for this, as we're moving forward, it's like, okay, we're gonna become that point of contact. We want to make sure that all of the players that are supporting you are connected, and we're a team together. So it's going to be easier. Hopefully it's going to remove some of that stress. We want to accelerate those researchers as well.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I'm sure some of the incubators that are already in place, you know, they have programs over there, and a lot of our SIVP or SVIP folks, they're already going into the incubators over there, and we kind of hand the baton to them and the incubators take it. Talk a bit about the complementarity that we do with V1 Studios, how we're working with those incubators.
Yeah, so a lot of the incubators, so what's interesting in Quebec is like some incubators are going to have a lot of services. They're going to have a specific expertises as well, like in different fields, whatnot. And we want to keep that, of course. For us, we want to make sure that there is an understanding of the challenges of scientific entrepreneurship, because it's not the same thing as other types of entrepreneurship, right?
Right.
There is nuances as well. We also want to be that safe space for researchers too. It's hectic. Entrepreneurship is hectic. So we want them to feel comfortable in a space where we can have those discussions too. And you know what? I'm talking. I forgot the question. What did you ask?
It was just a complementarity, how we're working with the other incubators, and because that's it. Like especially as we expand across the province, you know, they have their specialties over there. So, like you said,
So we like more specifically, and this is something that we have been doing in this pilot last year, is like having check-ins with the researchers like every 2 weeks, or a month, depending where they're in their journey. Working together on those OKRs to make sure like things are moving as well. And when we talk with the incubators, like making sure that the coaches are aware of the discussions that we're having, that the coaches tell us also like, hey, this may be a priority. So constant communication. So again, we can be a better team, basically.
Fantastic. And then, so provide us perhaps with a typical path that the researcher could have within the program.
With the Scientific Venture Program?
Yeah.
Sure. So they come in at different stages usually. Now, as we're moving forward in this new iteration, it's going to be entrepreneurs are going to be more validated. I'm going to say like validated. They have already been out. They're not super early stage, because we noticed that we can actually accelerate them way faster once they've done that first piece. And there's already a lot of support in the ecosystem to do that. But once they come in, we assess together. It's like, okay, what does your journey may look like in 1 year? Again, kind of like trying to remove that anxiety. This is a journey that could evolve, and we're okay with that. Like, okay with ambiguity, it's fine, but at least we know where you may be going, and that makes it easier too. Then when we see it at different levels, we see it at the human level, we see it at a technological level, and we see it as well on the business side of things. And a lot of those, of course, are going to be interconnected, but we want to make sure that we don't forget the human piece, and that's why we have it in those different levels. Because what we have noticed is like when we talk about scientific entrepreneurship, we usually talk about the innovations themselves. We forget the people behind them. And they're bright people that have a lot of skills that could be easily transferred into entrepreneurship. So we want to make sure that we're nurturing that so they become leaders themselves. I'm sure we're going to be talking to some of them, because like I'm very excited about that too.
Yes, we are. We're going to get into the interviews, and I'll ask you just the last question: your vision for the future for the new program, for the new version of this program.
What I would love to see, so in the long term overall, is like that culture change. I know this is going to sound potentially counterintuitive. If V1 doesn't exist, it's because we actually did our job. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
it became so ingrained. It's like everyone is just talking about it. We don't need to do more work. I'm sure we would evolve at that point. It's okay. But like ideally, it just becomes such a ingrained thing in the whole ecosystem, Quebec-wide, Canada-wide, that it's natural. You know, someone asks like, hey, you're about to finish your PhD, what are you going to do? I think I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And it's not a big thing. It's like, yeah, it's just one of the paths. You know, I think I'm going to go and explore it because we have created a safe environment for them to explore it and we're celebrating it. And another thing more in the short term, maybe like in the next year or next 2 years, I would like to see representation from all universities across Quebec. Like that gets me so excited. The fact that, you know what, we're actually going to have a network of scientific entrepreneurs. Like, that's just so cool. And we are going to gain so much in an individual level, but also overall as a community working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's super exciting and obviously a great privilege to be working with you, Diana. Thank you so much. And we're going to take a short pause. You're going to come into my seat and we'll get the interviews rolling with our next guest. Our guest is going to be Mr. Kevin. We're going to welcome him in. It's going to be Kevin Kelly, and he's our first scientific entrepreneur who is celebrating his first year in the program, almost to the day.
I know.
His parents are in town as well, so it's a lot of fun. And Kevin is the co-founder of Exia Technology. So let's give a warm welcome to Kevin Kelly. Let's switch.
Hello, hello. Where's your glass of water?
I'm good.
You're good? You're good? Perfect.
So thank you so much for having me. I was great learning about the history of V1, all these new improvements. I'm so jealous now.
Don't be. You'll be part forever. Don't worry. I got other stuff for you guys coming up in the future. But yeah.
Well, really good stuff. Yeah.
So thank you so much, like again, to saying yes to sharing a little bit of your journey. We chatted a little bit because I went on mat leave and I went back and I saw you right before I went. So it's been quite interesting to see kind of like the evolution. Like I could see it. And even I had the chance to be there when you pitched, you know, for the renewal, and we're very happy that you continue working with us. So
hopefully the second version's better.
Yeah, it was. It's okay.
Great.
It was great. And maybe just to share a little bit more about yourself, can you tell us how did you got into the study of water treatment? Like, what inspired you to get there?
Sure. So I guess if I could trace all of this back to anything, would be to my childhood curiosity. You know, I was a big fan of nature, animals, even rocks. So I used to love dinosaurs, right? And eventually I just learned about paleontology. I was reading colorful magazines of paleontology, mineralogy. So at that point, I knew that I was going to be a scientist. Yeah, it just came quite natural. And that official journey began with my bachelor's in biology, which I did in Mexico. And at the beginning, I wanted to dedicate my life to preserving wildlife.
Okay.
And, you know, in Mexico, we have a saying that you're a biologist de bota, which is a boot biologist, or de bata, which is a lab coat.
Okay.
So I wore the boot most of the bachelor's. And towards the end, I said, okay, I know how the boot feels. I want to put on the lab coat. And I had my last year where I was going to do the thesis, which was research-based.
Okay.
And just before that, I went to Chile to study for 6 months. And I took a course called water pollution. And then I just fell in love with the entire subject. So when I came back, I said, okay, I want to do my thesis on something related to water treatment. And then I got involved with materials that could filter pollutants out of the water. Then I started to, well, I really liked it and the results were good. So I said, let's just keep pushing this direction. And then I went on and worked with a company doing the same similar stuff for several years. I kept loving it. I kept pushing forward. Then I did my master's, again in the same field in the Netherlands. And then the PhD, again in the same field. And now Exia, which, you know, is related to that. You can see a lot of what I did in what I'm doing as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So basically, yeah, that's the story.
That's, wow, a lot of stuff happening to get you to that journey and then in the path of entrepreneurship. And I want to know, like, actually what brought you into thinking, like, you know what, I could become an entrepreneur, or like, just thinking of the concepts, I was a researcher and I'm going to be moving into entrepreneurship now.
Sure. I think the first event that really clarified that as a possibility for me was the master's. So the master's is in the Netherlands, and it's a super interesting program. So basically how it goes is a company sits down with an academic professor, and together they come up with specifically a PhD project aimed to solve the problem that the company has. Once they establish that, they hire someone to pursue the PhD project. So the PhD project is working on solving a problem of a company directly under the supervision of someone who represents the company, but as well with the support of an academic professor. And then the master students actually worked directly under the supervision of the PhD students. So I was a master student, and I was seeing, even master students create research that got patented, PhD students going on and doing spin-offs with the academic professors. Obviously, companies patenting all of the new innovations. So it was an ecosystem that really breathed, bridging the gap between real-world problems and academic insight. So yeah, that was one of the big inflection points where I said, okay, well, I know how it works. This could be for me. The second thing, which literally placed me on the path of entrepreneurship, was joining a startup at the beginning of my PhD.
Huh.
So I was doing my PhD. Towards the first year and a half, I said, let's get a side hustle. So I got an email from the department of McGill saying there's a startup looking for experts in this specific material. Okay, that's me. So I called them up, and then we were participating in an innovation competition called the X Prize.
Yeah.
We had to build a prototype that would pull water out of thin air. And we got a basement at ETS, and we had to create like a jungle in there with humidifiers and heaters. It had to run for 72 hours straight. And I remember it was 36 hours of not sleeping, looking at the machine, and it's not, the liquid water is not happening. We were drunk, laughing. And then suddenly I see this valve, and I say, that valve is not, we have to turn it. We turned the valve and then started to condense. I'm like, okay, now I can go sleep. Anyways, it was an incredible experience. We didn't win, but that's okay. And then I just kept working with the startup, and that pivoted into Exio Technologies.
Oh, yeah. Really? Okay, that's your origin story. That's very interesting. And like I'll just mention that you mentioned the culture, the fact that you saw other people doing it, and that directly influences like this is feasible.
Yeah.
And I love that, and that's what we're trying to create, right? I kind of mentioned it earlier with and that's exactly
so your vision is awesome. Hopefully that will happen.
Hopefully. But you are making it happen, and you're making that that inspiration, and I want to go maybe into what is the problem that you're trying to solve, like with your startup now.
Yeah, so if you're a company that's producing batteries for electric cars or cell phones, pharmaceuticals, if you're a hospital that has operating theaters, even ice rinks, you require dry air. Mm-hmm. And the only way that these companies can do that is through a machine called a dehumidifier. And that machine has a sponge inside. The sponge basically grabs moisture from the air and then just expels it to the outside of the space. And it uses heat to keep doing that continuously. The only problem is that these sponges are 60 years old. So they're definitely not designed for energy efficiency, meaning that they require a lot of heat to get dry so that it can operate continuously. Mm-hmm. So we're coming in with a new generation of sponges based on a completely new technology. We replace the old sponge, and that way we empower the end user to save money and become greener. Yeah.
That's amazing. And again, coming from an origin story, staying 36 hours to making sure that everything is working well. And now you're celebrating, we mentioned like your first year in scientific venture program. So tell me a little bit about your experience that and like the scientific venture program.
So I think one of the things that I really like is the human-centric factor. That's one of my values, to always see the human before the functionary, before the cog in the wheel. And that's just breathed by, you said it, right? So important. So that really aligned on a personal level. So it's something that I really enjoyed and something I feed off to keep going and feel good about this reality every day. And the second thing I would say is that, I mean, I came into the program thinking that I had a plan and that it was a good plan. But then, you know, the scientific venture managers would come in and start to tell me otherwise. And then I would listen to their advice, put it in practice, and very shortly see the good results. So it's been helpful. It works, basically. You know, I feel I'm in good hands. We can prove that we're in good hands. You'll be in good hands, whoever joins this. So yeah, I would wrap it up by saying those two things.
Oh, and you know what? It's that human aspect is like, it's again the right environment. Like you feel in the right environment, and like that already unlocks something personal. It's like, I feel safe. Let's go and explore something together. And then you came in, coming from that research world, transitioning into the entrepreneurship. For sure, there are challenges, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about those.
I think the biggest challenge for me was fear of the unknown.
Right.
When I was a young researcher, I would always I would see a company, I would say, how do you start this? Like, how do you go about creating a new technology that's better, and then build a product and then sell it all over the world? So not really knowing how that worked would just put the entire concept on a pedestal, which seemed impossible to reach. So obviously, the experience during the masters and then getting involved in a startup just really brought that pedestal back to earth, and they said it's not that I mean, it's doable, right? This is how you do it. And the second challenge I would say is to find the right solution for the right people in the right way at the right time. That's a challenge that every entrepreneur faces, but luckily there's a lot of frameworks for that, you know. So there's a lot of support you can get. It's just about putting in the hours. But I would say those were the two biggest challenges. Yeah.
And you, they kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier, you know, that ecosystem where you were in there in your masters, like the problem, making sure that there's a problem exists in the market and going and try to solve it. It's exactly that. It's like trying to make sure that there is that connection and that fit.
Yeah.
So you can end up doing the work. And
that program is super successful, the one in the Netherlands. Like,
yeah,
they're innovating so much. So yeah, it's great that it's happening here too. Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out, and we need
should do
BFFs everywhere for sure. So now, you know, you've been through an experience, you're still in that experience, like you know, in entrepreneurship, it's a hustle always. So I would love to hear from you, what is maybe some of the advice that you would give to people coming into the program, or maybe starting that journey?
Yeah, I would just advise that you make sure you have a very strong motivation to want to solve a problem, because it's not easy. It requires a lot of work. So if you have that motivation, that's like halfway there.
Right.
The second might seem cliche, but I would advise them to read a lot. You know, there's a lot of problems, and there's so many information out there from people that do this very well, that have done it many times, and it's practically free and available to you. There's going to be a lot of problems, so reading is a good way to solve them. So just take a dive, and every time you'll emerge even greater.
Yeah, you're not alone. Someone has gone through it somehow.
Yeah.
So the information is out there. You just need to go and find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love that advice. Reading, it's always a good one. And now more in like, just, you know, we're gonna wrap up, but I want to hear more from a personal experience. Like how do you think you've evolved, or how this program and this experience have transformed you?
I think it just has made me more excited. You know, at the beginning, you have this idea of how it's going to be, but then you come into a program and you submerge yourself in a reality that's great, that helps you do that. So the motivation has been increased a lot. So I would say that I'm a lot more motivated, and a lot more passionate about doing this. Right. So yeah, I think that would be the main message.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Kevin. Beautiful stuff. Et puis, j'étais déjà à notre prochain invité. Donc, on va accueillir quelqu'un qui est venu du monde corporatif. pour ensuite réintégrer le milieu académique et poursuivre un doctorat en génie logiciel. Il fait partie du programme saisi depuis près de 2 ans et est le fondateur de la startup cybersécurité Centrify. Accueillons Jonathan Roy.
Bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Ça va? Là, tu arrives avec de l'eau. C'est
Oui.
parfait. T'es
Oui.
prêt?
Oui, je suis prêt.
Parfait, cool. Ben, déjà, très contente d'être là et pouvoir discuter. Tu vas pouvoir nous partager un peu plus de ton parcours. Je sais que c'est pas une ligne, c'est pas droit, puis il y a beaucoup
Non.
d'exploration. Fait que déjà, on commence par qu'est-ce qui t'a ramené à ce monde-là de la cybersécurité?
Donc, de formation, je suis ingénieur en génie logiciel. J'ai travaillé en génie logiciel pendant plusieurs années et en génie logiciel, il y avait beaucoup d'enjeux de cybersécurité à l'époque. Donc, j'ai décidé de me spécialiser en cybersécurité. Et en travaillant en cybersécurité, j'ai découvert qu'il y avait beaucoup de problématiques encore dans le domaine. Et donc, j'ai décidé d'aller faire de la recherche pour essayer de résoudre certaines de ces problématiques-là que j'observais en fait dans l'industrie.
Et alors bouger du côté de l'industrie, aller à la recherche, puis là, le monde entrepreneuriat. Fait que c'était quoi le problème ou qu'est-ce que tu as vu qu'est-ce que tu voulais t'attaquer surtout?
En fait, ce que je voyais, c'est qu'il y avait énormément de recherches qui se faisaient, par exemple, en génie logiciel. Puis en génie, on fait de la recherche appliquée souvent. Donc, l'objectif, c'est d'aider les gens qui pratiquent dans le domaine. Donc, la validation ultime, si tu veux, d'une recherche en génie, ce serait qu'un ingénieur puisse utiliser les fruits de ta recherche pour améliorer la pratique. Et ça, en génie, c'est difficile parfois parce que quand on va publier un article, c'est pas sous forme de produit qui peut être utilisé par un praticien, par exemple, dans l'industrie. Donc, souvent, ce que j'observais, c'est qu'il y avait des problématiques dans l'industrie pour lesquelles il y a des solutions qui avaient été développées, qui avaient été publiées, mais qui n'étaient pas disponibles pour les ingénieurs parce qu'il manquait justement toute l'étape de développer un produit, commercialiser la solution pour qu'elle puisse en fait utiliser cette solution-là. Donc, ça, c'était un problème que j'observais. Puis je me suis dit, OK, c'est quoi le chemin que je peux prendre justement pour passer à l'autre étape, aller au-delà d'un article et vraiment développer un produit pour vraiment changer ou aider les ingénieurs qui travaillent dans le domaine.
C'est génial, puis c'est exactement ça. Il y a un manque, il y a un petit bout qui manque pour pouvoir finalement faire l'impact. Alors, tout le travail qui est en train d'être fait de mon académique, c'est surtout ça. Puis, alors, je veux parler maintenant de ces transitions, en fait, finalement, la transition du monde académique, le monde de recherche, vers l'entrepreneuriat. C'était comment pour toi, ça?
Très intéressant. Il faut devenir une personne un peu différente. Il y a beaucoup de qualités qu'on développe comme chercheur qu'on peut transférer de l'autre côté. Je dirais, par exemple, la rigueur avec laquelle on définit une problématique. Ça, c'est quelque chose de clé pour avoir un succès en affaires. Parce que si on travaille sur une problématique qui n'est pas suffisamment importante ou criante, ça va être très difficile de vendre son produit. La rigueur avec laquelle on valide justement cette problématique-là, la rigueur avec laquelle on développe la solution, qu'on valide nos résultats. Donc, ces qualités-là de chercheur, je pense qu'on peut les transférer de façon directe. Ce qui est vraiment différent, c'est les objectifs. Donc, quand on est chercheur, l'objectif, c'est de pousser les connaissances, de se faire reconnaître par ses pairs et de publier ces découvertes-là. Quand on est entrepreneur, il y a tout l'aspect de rentabilité qui rentre en ligne de compte. Un exemple, quand on est chercheur, la problématique qu'on essaie de résoudre, c'est ça qui va déterminer le temps dont on va avoir besoin pour arriver au résultat. Quand on est entrepreneur, la vitesse avec laquelle on progresse, c'est critique parce qu'il y a des enjeux de rentabilité, justement. Donc, il faut être capable de suffisamment rapidement être capable de générer des revenus pour continuer à avancer, continuer à évoluer. Donc, cette transition-là, il faut la travailler, puis il faut bien s'aligner sur les objectifs, en fait, en entrepreneuriat qui sont différents.
Puis ça, c'est toutes des compétences qu'on peut apprendre. En fait, c'est pas trop loin, c'est nouvelle, mais ça se fait.
Oui, ça se fait. Oui, je suis entièrement d'accord. Ça se fait en étant entouré de gens qui l'ont déjà fait.
Ouais.
Je pense que le but d'un programme comme ça, c'est d'avoir de plus en plus de gens qui vont avoir fait ce parcours-là, qui vont pouvoir s'aider entre eux.
Exactement.
Et ça, c'est la meilleure école, selon moi. Je pense que c'est important qu'on en ait un grand nombre parce qu'on sait que très peu vont vraiment probablement devenir une réussite rentable, etc., parce qu'il y a beaucoup, beaucoup de difficultés en cours de route. Donc, si on est un grand nombre de gens au Québec, au Canada, qui ont fait ce parcours-là, on a beaucoup plus de chances de commercialiser la recherche et donc d'avoir de l'impact avec la recherche au Canada puis au Québec.
Oui, 100%. Et alors, plus spécifiquement, quand on parle de l'impact de la recherche et comment tu le fais toi-même, personnellement, tu peux parler un peu de problèmes peut-être que tu essaies de résoudre avec une startup, le problème que tu as trouvé dans le marché?
Oui, tout à fait. Donc, en cybersécurité, c'est très important de pouvoir identifier les risques cyber d'une entreprise rapidement, parce que plus rapidement on les identifie, plus rapidement on peut mettre des mesures en place pour traiter ces risques-là. Et la rapidité avec laquelle on peut les identifier dépend beaucoup de la rapidité avec laquelle on peut traiter les données qui sont nécessaires pour faire les analyses.
Okay.
Et il faut traiter une grande quantité de données. C'est des données qui sont très disparates, donc de différentes sources, dans différents formats. Et c'est fait manuellement aujourd'hui parce qu'il n'y a pas de modèle qui permet d'automatiser l'organisation de ces données-là pour qu'elles soient rapidement prêtes à être exploitées, donc analysées et pour identifier les risques. Donc, ce qu'on a fait, c'est qu'on a développé un modèle, en fait, qui permet justement d'automatiser la collection, l'organisation des données, ce qui fait en sorte qu'on offre un modèle de données qui est prêt à être exploité par les analystes. Donc, ils peuvent produire leurs analyses à partir des données qu'on leur donne directement, sans faire tout ce travail-là manuellement. Oui.
Alors, ça sauve du temps. Ils peuvent passer leur temps dans des autres choses, peut-être pas plus importantes, mais qui peuvent améliorer aussi tous les systèmes à l'interne.
Exact. Donc, ils sauvent beaucoup de temps, beaucoup plus précis au niveau des risques qui sont identifiés.
Parfait.
Et donc, ils peuvent se concentrer justement sur le traitement de ces risques-là. Donc, on peut réagir beaucoup plus rapidement et se protéger beaucoup plus rapidement.
Donner les cadeaux de l'agilité, finalement, à la fin, pour qu'ils puissent être tout le temps en préparation, mais aussi pour que ça ne soit pas trop tard. Il y a avoir des erreurs, des grosses erreurs qui peuvent coûter beaucoup, beaucoup d'argent, mais aussi beaucoup de projets à risque.
Oui.
Et alors là, tu es presque 2 ans, c'est fou, parce que le temps passe très, très vite. Puis je sais que tu as travaillé aussi avec NextAI et avec des autres programmes, mettons le programme de validation en District 3. Est-ce que tu peux nous parler un peu de ton expérience dans le contexte du programme du CESI, en fait, le CES maintenant? J'imagine la création d'entrepreneurs scientifiques, mais ça devenait innovant.
Oui. Oui, en fait, le programme m'a aidé justement à m'orienter. Donc, j'avais aucune connaissance de l'écosystème. Je ne connaissais pas les programmes, je ne connaissais pas les accélérateurs, les incubateurs, parce que dans mon cas, j'avais été dans l'industrie quand même plusieurs années avant de revenir du côté académique et ensuite de ça en entrepreneurship. Donc, ça m'a beaucoup aidé justement à découvrir toutes les ressources qui sont disponibles au Québec. Les accélérateurs, quels sont les différents modèles, qu'est-ce que ça peut m'apporter, qu'est-ce que je peux développer, autant du point de vue technologique que du point de vue affaires ou comme personne, en fait, donc d'un point de vue humain, la personne qu'on doit devenir pour être un entrepreneur, c'est clé. Donc ça a été vraiment un des très grands avantages du programme, c'est cette orientation-là dans l'écosystème pour en tirer le maximum, en fait. Ouais.
Exactement. Et alors, encore, l'entrepreneuriat, c'est pas facile. Tu peux me parler un peu, c'est quoi peut-être les plus gros challenges que tu as vécu dans les 2 années qui viennent passer? Oui,
donc c'est un des plus grands challenges, je crois, c'est la rapidité avec laquelle il faut prendre des décisions. La rapidité d'exécution. Donc, il faut vraiment passer à la vitesse supérieure au niveau décisionnel, être à l'aise de prendre des risques au niveau décisionnel aussi. Donc, prendre des décisions avec peu d'informations tout en sachant que Si on ne prend pas la bonne décision, on va s'en remettre dans la majorité des cas. On va apprendre, puis on va continuer. Donc, il faut rapidement prendre des décisions pour rapidement avoir une rétroaction, pour rapidement pouvoir se réorienter. Si on ne fait pas ce cycle-là, si on ne se lance pas, disons, si on ne prend pas ce risque-là, on risque justement de ne pas avancer suffisamment rapidement. Et d'où l'objectif, encore une fois, de rentabilité. Donc, comment on exécute rapidement, c'est en prenant des risques, finalement.
Oui, ça, c'est un gros mindset change, en fait, finalement, un changement qui est comme les timings ne sont pas les mêmes, finalement.
Non. Non, les timings ne sont pas les mêmes. Comme je disais, en recherche, l'objectif va déterminer le temps. En affaires, c'est la rentabilité qui va déterminer le temps. Et donc, ça a beaucoup d'impact sur l'exécution, en fait. Ouais.
Puis, alors, là, encore, ça fait un bout, là, 2 ans que tu as commencé ces parcours. Et déjà, je sais qu'avant, on se connaît des autres programmes aussi. J'aimerais savoir, en ce moment, ce serait quoi un conseil que tu donnerais aux personnes qui postulent le programme ou qui pensent à embarquer à ce programme-là?
De ne pas avoir peur. Parce que, comme je disais, il y a beaucoup de qualités qu'on développe comme chercheurs qui sont transférables. Donc, on ne part pas de zéro. Puis, je pense qu'on peut se rendre rapidement compte qu'on peut tirer profit de ces qualités-là qu'on a développées comme chercheurs. Puis aussi, ce que je dirais, c'est que c'est une très belle façon d'avoir beaucoup d'impact potentiellement comme chercheur. Il y a un risque, il n'y a pas de garantie que ça va fonctionner, mais si ça fonctionne, l'impact qu'on a comme entrepreneur est très différent que de l'impact d'un chercheur, dans le sens où c'est très tangible. On peut voir en action le résultat et on peut mesurer dans le monde réel, opérationnel réel, les bénéfices. Et ça peut être très, très, très motivant comme objectif.
Ouais. Tous les gens que tu touches finalement, tu facilites la vie de beaucoup de personnes.
Oui.
Et c'est une belle façon de valoriser la recherche, finalement. C'est une belle voie, une belle façon.
Oui.
Et alors là, ça, on embarque un peu plus de toi. Puis avec ça, on va être fini notre petite entrevue. Mais j'aimerais savoir, toi, comment tu t'es transformé d'une façon plus personnellement pendant tous les parcours du programme.
Oui. Je dirais que j'ai appris à prendre beaucoup plus, d'être plus tolérant aux risques, d'être moins attentif aux détails dans certaines situations. J'ai appris à comprendre quelle situation était très importante au niveau du niveau de détail qu'on devait apporter versus d'autres situations où le niveau de détail n'est pas nécessairement aussi important que la rapidité avec laquelle on va agir pour apprendre rapidement, sachant qu'on n'a pas nécessairement résolu tous les détails, disons. Ça, c'est une tendance qu'on a un peu, je pense, comme chercheur, qu'il faut apprendre à faire évoluer et à transformer. Puis ça, je sens vraiment que ce parcours-là, je l'ai fait et que j'ai franchi cette étape-là, en fait, personnellement. Ouais.
Enfin, merci beaucoup, Jonathan, pour le partage. J'apprécie beaucoup. On est très heureux de te voir. Merci.
Merci.
So thank you very much, Jonathan, for that. And we're going to have our next guest, our last guest for this evening. He holds a PhD in biology. He's the co-founder of GC Lipid Tech, an ocean tech startup working on solutions with microalgae to help feed the planet. Let's give a warm welcome to Dylan Jonke.
Hello, Dylan.
Hello, hello.
Hello, nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you too, and my fellow SVPers. I'm glad that I can be a part of this.
Yeah, I'm very excited to dig a little bit into your journey. And again, you've also been around for 2 years. Right. Getting there into the anniversary, the V1 anniversary. I would love to, let's start with just what brought you into this field of study, like because you did your PhD in cancer biology.
Correct. Yeah. So this has been like a dual story almost. My first experience with microalgae started in my bachelor's, where I worked on a small project using microalgae to try to tinker with its genome, figure out what we can do with it. When that project concluded, I was actually really inspired to keep on doing research. So this is where I went and started looking for projects. And I had a great supervisor at the time that helped me with one of my undergrad projects. And so I was like, can I work in your lab? And so came up with this really nice, cool project studying a novel family of anti-cancer molecules. I did 1 year on that research as a master's. And then beyond that, I was like, I need to do more of this. I'm like, I just needed to learn. There's so much to unpack. I wasn't done with it. So then I did my fast track, which means that you could turn your master's into a PhD as long as you're able to validate all the research you've done. And so I was granted that opportunity. And so I spent the next 4 years, four and a half years working on my PhD, developing these molecules. And from that point on, I was hooked. I was hooked on the entire aspect of science. I loved science as a kid, but this was like taking it to the whole new next level. Like everything you learn is almost a brand new type of knowledge you're contributing to the world and to the field. So yeah.
That's a great environment to be in, like super exciting. And then it goes into the question, I guess. So you move from cancer biology to that world of aquacultures for your startup, which is quite different. So maybe tell me a little bit how that came about. What is the problem that you're trying to solve with your startup?
Yeah. So going back to the academic side, so after we kind of developed these molecules and studied them, we created IP. And I was like, well, this is interesting. I'm like, this is no longer a regular publication, right? So it's like, what do you do with IP? And this is like, well, somebody has to commercialize this. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? I'm like, I have no idea. So it was actually because like my PhD came to an end. I was like, I need to do something that's, that's business oriented, that can allow me to explore this kind of realm of using IP, commercializing it, interacting with an industry and its needs. And so this is where I picked up again this the microalgae, because we had worked on it in the past. And so we said, what can we do with it? And so when I went back, so this now goes into the personal aspect as to why we want to cater to this market, is I went back to Mauritius, which is the home country of my father. And when I went there 7 years ago, whenever we went fishing, we went into open ocean. It's right in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And that's what fishing was. Nowadays, when I went back most recently, like 2 years ago, I noticed that like aquaculture just dominated the entire coastal regions. And I said, well, for such a small island with such a small population, how is it that aquacultures are, overtaking just natural fishing? And so that kind of got me thinking, and I was like, okay, well, what is it that we can do? Where does the food come from? And I went down this rabbit hole of like hours and hours of just researching and trying to understand this little black box that I didn't really fully understand. And then I saw that, feeding the fish is a big issue. And so the market currently relies on forage fish, which means they go and they acquire the small fish, pelagic fish from open oceans, bring them inland, grind them up, produce product, which is the pellet, and then they feed that to their aquacultures. Now, for any of you that, and know something about aquacultures, it's growing. It's actually going to dominate as a protein source for marine-derived protein in the next decade. And so how do we keep this in a sustainable fashion without depleting the ocean? So most of the solutions right now is to find alternative sources of protein or lipids, antioxidants, etc. And that comes from other supply chains that are necessary for humans to live off of. So there's no completely independent supply chain for these high quality nutrients. And so I decided to say, well, what if microalgae was that solution? And so now we started exploring. We incorporated, my brother and I are co-founders of GC Lipid Technologies. And so we're trying to use microalgae, enhanced microalgae, to produce the high quality nutrients fish need in aquaculture without depleting the natural resources, such as forage fish and other sources of nutrients that we acquire unsustainably.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's a huge problem. It's so impressive how I think our brain works. Like you went to this trip, so like, what is this? Got curious, and then you're here. It's so interesting how things happen, and life happens in that way, and it takes you to unexpected paths. And talking about unexpected paths, then there is this transition again that happened from academia to entrepreneurship. So this mental shift, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So this is it's a huge mental shift, because academia is one side of the coin. Knowing how to bring your deep technology to a market is the complete opposite. It's the other side of the coin. And so one thing that I noticed is, as I was changing this, my mindset, I realized that I understood the technology. I understood it well enough that I can potentially output something of value to a problem. The biggest issue is, how do I communicate this effectively to stakeholders, investors, to incubators, just so that they would see the value of what we're trying to develop, and then eventually to the clients that are going to purchase this product. And so that was just that list of questions that I needed to start answering, and practicing and understanding how I can give this passion to them, but through a tangible product. And so yeah, that's the biggest shift, was really understanding that phase. And so I'm still going through it, and it's going to be almost 2 years, and I'm still learning every single day. I'm learning a different way of developing my personality, being a better person, but also understanding how to be a better entrepreneur as a whole. And then eventually learning how to tap into these markets and show them that this is a need that they have that might not have been solved in the past, but we have the opportunity now to potentially solve it and address it properly. And so getting that dialogue and that the whole communications with these stakeholders has been one of the biggest kind of boosts in my development as an entrepreneur, because there's so many things that we can do as assumptions and hypotheses, but you just got to step out and just start talking to these individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's you validate like all of those assumptions that happen. You need to go and see what's happening, right? And it's in a very actionable way and determined way and perseverant way, because not everyone necessarily talk to you.
Yeah.
But you're gonna find the people that will, and that's why you need to go find them.
Yeah.
And then again, there's this mental shift that happened, and thank you for sharing that. And do you see yourself continuing or going back into the academic world? Like, where are you right now?
So, well, I think just this Monday, I found myself going to the lab for 12 hours, and I haven't done that in 3 years. And I was just like, I guess I'm never going to leave this kind of, this environment. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. I was really happy to know that I could still do it, because, you feel rusty, you haven't done these experiments, you feel a little bit off. But I went back and I'm like, no, you still got it. There's something there. So I don't think I'm ever going to divorce these two from myself. I'll always be a scientist, a researcher that's willing to go into the lab, get my hands dirty, figure it out, and do something about it. But I'll always be okay just stepping out of that zone for a bit, becoming that entrepreneur, figuring out how I can, make this seamless transition from knowledge to actionable players, and giving them that, that level of technological advancement that they need in their industry. So I'll play both sides for now. I don't think I'm going to choose now or for the longest time.
Right. And you know what? I think one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship is there's a lot of constraints, because there's a lot of things that you have to do, but also there's a lot of freedom in creating what the company would look like and what your role is. Like, there's a lot of empowerment coming from that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, and that's it's the most fascinating part, because it's your company, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do anything about it, nothing will get done. And on the other side of that coin is, well, if you do something about it, what can it become? Like, how far can you go? And how well can you represent the mission and vision of your company to the point where people are like, that's exactly what we needed. And that's where they're willing to, invest their time, their efforts, and see you as the leading force to solving a big problem that permeates, problems at a small scale, but also at a large scale that globally affects humanity. And so I love that you have full control of that message. And you just go for it.
Yeah. And you know what? That one of the things that I've loved working with scientific entrepreneurs is, and I keep saying this word all the time, by the way, I know it's impact. I know I say it all the time, but is that there is this drive to do this thing, whatever that may be, but making sure that they have the space so they don't lose themselves. And that's super important, right? It's
100%.
How do you stay true to your values? Because there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of conception when people think of entrepreneurship. Researchers think of entrepreneurship is I'm going to sell out. No, actually, it may unlock you in many different ways that you may not think.
Yeah.
So going into that, again, that journey in the scientific venture program, a lot of people interested in that. What is your advice?
I would say V1 is a perfect first stepping stone towards becoming a great entrepreneur. For the simple fact that it creates the sense of community, the fact that you can talk to peers and be like, yeah, we're going through the same problem. That's great. We could even, sit together and figure it out together, or go about our own ways, but we can discuss about it. We have that ability and that option to talk about the struggles of being an entrepreneur, but also the fact that it creates a sandbox in which you can operate. You can build your company to its limits, where you have advisors pushing back or challenging your safe assumptions that you think are, that are correct. They're able to challenge you, and they're like, well, come back and see if you validated that assumption or not. Because, lots of these assumptions are sometimes what gets you going on the wrong path. It strays you away from your actual message. or your company's objective, that you do get sidetracked, and they're always there to bring you back on track, as in ways of challenging you, support of their networks, as well as regular meetups. Because sometimes, something happens, you're going through a stressful time, you can get like brain fog and start forgetting how you're supposed to navigate this, but they're there as a sounding board to remind you of what you told them last meeting. Like, yeah, but you were looking at this, right? And so how does that go? Like, did you make an advancement? You're like, yeah, it's true, but we did actually make something. Yeah, okay. And then you start coming back to like your senses a bit. And so it's like it's a sandbox, but it's also a beacon of sanity that, it's okay. Take your time. Sometimes it's a roller coaster ride, right? And so, yeah, it brings you back to like your actual objective and your mission that you really want to see move forward. It's just sometimes situation makes it tough.
Yeah, and there's so many things, so many balls that you're juggling at the same time. So it's very easy to kind of like lose the focus and lose track, and like, this is where I should be going.
Yeah.
And just one thing, just for fun.
Yeah.
How is it working with your brother? Like,
Yeah.
founders, right? That's common.
Yeah. So it's interesting because we've obviously been brothers for our whole life, but right, like not for part-time. Yeah. So we know everything about each other, and I think one advantage I would say is it kind of allows us to have these very clean-cut conversations where you're not worried about like offending or whatever. It's just like, we're trying to achieve something. Let's just have it out and like have it very systematically. And so those conversations, again, it's like a sobering conversation because you're not trying to discuss everything other than what you're focused on right now. And so we have that alignment. We did martial arts together for like 15 years of our lives. So we have a good understanding of our, our limits, each other's limits. And we're always able to be like very clear about the intentions that we want to execute and move forward. So I love that. That is something that I find that gives us a good advantage. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. I'm not saying everybody that has a sibling should go in business with their sibling.
Yeah, that's not my,
that's not my, not for me to choose.
Make it clear.
But I guess like in our context, we were lucky because we had that alignment beforehand. And so building a company just created like this new kind of endeavor that we're just willing to tackle together.
Yeah. And you know what, like the points that you said, like those skills, like you need for a co-founder and like to work, is that it's basically we need to make sure that we can have the hard conversations and like align 100%. And understand our limits, and to have those discussions at the end and be comfortable with being vulnerable, but also being okay with whatever risk we're taking, right? So that's great. So then into my last question, we're almost done here. We'd love to know, like, how does this program change you personally?
How it changed me? Well, it gave me a chance to grow, and that's something that I think that you don't really notice until you've kind of passed this chasm of like uncertainty. And then you look back and you're like, wow, I've actually changed a lot considerably. My way of thinking, my way of, trying to interact with the work that I'm doing, with, the IP that I want to build. Like, I'm extremely focused and strategic about it. So it shows you that you can't leverage your scientific and research mind in a way that is very refined towards achieving a very specific goal that meets a market's need. And so like it becomes a very nice and clean way of approaching a problem. Whereas in research, you approach a problem by creating multiple hypotheses, multiple experiments, and you kind of iteratively go through it. You still do that as an entrepreneur, but you're always just like mine on the money. Like you need to get to that point, and how do you get there is for you to figure out, and you keep moving forward. So it has built me in that sense where I'm allowed to use that kind of level of strategy and level of personality to interact with these problems. And so I enjoyed knowing that I could do that now.
Thank you so much, Dylan, for sharing. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Diana.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much. What a fascinating conversation. I am so happy that this all worked out in a way that enables us to learn from each other. And we're going to take some questions from the audience. If anybody has some, feel free to go and ask. We also have our Zoom that's open. So does anybody want to ask a question for our fine guests over here? Anybody from the audience? Anybody? Yeah. Oh, we got a question over here. Okay, so maybe we'll pass them over a mic.
Bring a mic over.
Thank you for your inspiring stories. What are important milestones V1 Studios has allowed you to achieve over your journey with them to each of your respective businesses?
No pressure. I'm here.
I would say that there's a validation program that exists, and I was not aware of it. And V1 told me, at this stage, it would be good for you to do this validation program because you can validate, your value proposition. You're going to have to talk to people, potential customers, and completing that program with the value proposition defined and validated to some extent through the interviews. That was a major milestone in my case, yes, because after that, I really felt that what I was doing was grounded in something solid, and it's V1 Studio that oriented me in that direction at the right time in my journey. Yeah.
Yeah, funny. I also have to talk about validation. I was also not aware about it, and sometimes as a scientist, you think you've created the best technology in the world and you just want to push it into the market. Obviously, that's not the best way to go about it. So it's that's what validation does, right? It helps you understand where the need of the market is and then, pull it, and then, hopefully you'll already have something that can potentially back that up. The other milestone, I guess, would be developing technology. So we need to develop proprietary technology, and the space that they provide is critical to us. And between those two things, validating need and then starting to develop a technology to meet that need, we were able to begin tests with a client. So I guess that was another super big milestone, which depended, directly, obligately on everything that we've been doing at V1. Yep.
Part of the milestone that V1 allowed us to accomplish was the whole the laboratory setting. It's very difficult for us to operate without a lab. And so they gave us the access and the resources that we needed to continuously do our R&D. And for a biotech company, that's huge, because you can do every other milestone and it doesn't really matter if you can't do the actual physical work. And so unlocking that for us gave us all the opportunities and allowed us to move forward in a seamless manner. And so that's a major milestone, and that helps us with IP, because now we're able to output more IP, increases credibility amongst other incubators, accelerators, and investors as a whole. So those are like milestones that are unlocked, achieved, and you can actually push forward and you could promote them as in like, yes, there's someone there that literally cross-checked me with my assumptions and showed me that there is a better way to do it. So I had to level up and figure it out and, be able to showcase what we've done so far. And so that's an evolving situation. So there's multiple milestones, but I would say at least those two. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? We have some questions on the Zoom, which I can go into. So what are some misconceptions that researchers might have about entrepreneurship? So what are some of the things that you thought in your mind that this is kind of like what it's like, but actually it's not really like that, and you learned something?
I think I'll answer this one. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's the first one is assuming that nobody has gone through this the same way that you think you're going to go through it. So just if you want to dive into entrepreneurship, make a pros and cons list. That's great. It's a good internal conversation to have. Put that aside and then go talk to mentors or talk to people that look like the kind of individual or personality you want to become, and see how their journey was, because it was as risky and as obscure sometimes as what you think it is, but they figured it out. So that's the first kind of maybe misconception that we all start with at the beginning, is like, well, this seems like this open water. There's nobody here for support, but that's not true. So have those conversations right away.
Maybe to think that it's all about making money and just about money. And I don't think that's the case. I think most entrepreneurs I talk to, they want to solve an issue that is a actual problem in the world. They want to improve the world, and the way to improve it is actually to instantiate something tangible in the world that will have an impact, a tangible impact in the world. And I think that if you focus on that, you are probably going to make money. And the reason for that is because people will actually use it. And by using it, you're going to generate value, and you can use that value to maintain what you just put in the world. Because it's one thing to put something in the world, but if you don't generate money to keep it alive, it's going to die. So you need to make money to have an impact.
Yeah.
But the focus is on having an impact first. So yeah.
And I'll add something here, like it's, when we talk about business models, when we think about entrepreneurship, we usually make this assumption that it's a for profit, and you kind of mention it, but you know what, even if you build a nonprofit, you still have the same mechanisms to organize, because even if you're running it, you need to eat, like you need to sustain yourself so you can do all of the amazing work that you're doing. So you need to kind of like think about your business model and how it can be consistent in the same way that any other entrepreneur would do it.
Yeah, so I'll definitely echo what Jonathan said. It really isn't about getting rich. Most entrepreneurs, they start off wanting to solve a problem, right? The money just comes later, but it's really about helping people that have a need. And I guess another misconception is that you won't end up just doing paperwork. You'll, as Dylan said, you'll probably be in the lab doing more science. You'll be even validating hypotheses in a different way, but that also rings a bell to the scientists that work with scientific methods. So yeah, you'll be doing lots of things.
Fantastic. Well, that's great, because it goes into another question in terms of, like, because you do get to do a bit of research, you do sort of keep one foot in the academic world. What are some of the transferable skills that you have taken from your research career, and how have you applied those into your new entrepreneurship environments?
Sure, I'll start with that one. I think that as a scientist, you really have to be wary of wishful thinking. It's very easy to go down that road. You need to make sure you follow the data crumb by crumb. And that skill is critical as well as an entrepreneur, especially when you're trying to understand the need of the customer. You really have to listen to them, and you really need to make sure that whatever you are doing is designed to soothe that cry from the customer. Yeah.
I would say the capacity to state hypothesis and knowing how to do it in a very effective way, and validating or invalidating your hypothesis. And those two skills are really useful, transferable. This is a cycle I go through multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Every day I have hypotheses. Every day I have to find a way to validate them or invalidate them, and it's going to affect the decision I'm going to make, the actions I'm going to take, and where I'm going to go with the business. So, exactly. So, and not having this kind of mindset where you're trying to invalidate it, not validate it, but invalidate it. And if you can't, then it's probably on the right track. Not having fear, the fear to do that as well, I think is something that we build up as a scientist. So yes.
I would say dissemination of information, whether written or verbal. I didn't realize how many grants we would be writing. So
And entrepreneurship, you're not getting out of that.
I thought I was done when I wrote my thesis. I was like, this is it. I'm never going to write again. But no, clearly, there's a lot of writing, because a startup, the best way to, showcase your work, but also to kind of proof concept yourself, is to write it down and see if you can get evaluations from your peers. And if they agree, or if they see some inconsistencies, but that's the body of work that you're outputting. So being able to communicate your problem, your solution, how you are addressing it, your strategy, IP or otherwise, in written form is like, it's a huge skill that I believe that any PhD will agree that they have, but they don't necessarily maybe use it all the time, expecting to, get rewarded. But in the startup world, yes, when you write grants, you're definitely tapping into that old self that's like, I need to organize this paragraph because this does not make sense. And you're rewriting the same thing 5 times, and you're like, I'll look at it tomorrow because it's still not going to make sense. So it's like, yeah, dissemination of information is key, and I think that's one that what passed from academia to entrepreneurship for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when you're talking about access to funding and writing grants. We have questions from our audience on the Zoom. They ask for any of you, and Diana, maybe you want to jump in as well. Does a scientific entrepreneur have the same access or chances to obtain private investments as other entrepreneurs? Does a scientific entrepreneur have the same access to private investment as other entrepreneurs, or something to consider with that?
It's an interesting question. I don't know how to answer it because I haven't got like that much money to consider like, yes, I did it. But I would look at it as it is possible, because since you're the scientist behind the technology, you've already kind of checked that box for an investor. So they know that if there's experts, you're probably one of them. And so I think that kind of alleviates, the risk on their end. But the next part of that is, can you, really bring it to the market where they see the value? So that's, showing that figure in their eyes and them agreeing is your next challenge. But being a scientist that's also an entrepreneur, I feel like that gives you an advantage, if I have to say. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's a very good question. Personally, I don't think that the private investors care if we're scientific entrepreneurs or not. They really care about the value proposition and the viability of the business. However, when you're a scientific entrepreneur, you have access to a lot of money in the form of grants that can help you develop your value proposition to a point where it's very evolved and mature. And then this can help you, I think, get more private funding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just add that science is a very effective tool towards solving problems. So obviously, very big problematics will be looking to resort to science for solutions. So it just might be that your expertise ends up being aligned with what the world needs. So you might get some leverage in that way.
Maybe I'll add something.
Yeah.
The good investors invest first in people, the team, and then they see what you're developing, because they need to make sure that you're the right person. So yes, you have the right vision, you have the skills, and you have the team to back you up to make it happen. And so when we talk about scientific entrepreneurship, it's so large, it depends, it's how do you define scientific entrepreneurship? That's a whole other episode, I think. That will be fun. But it's, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's like, they're going to see the people, the mission. Can you make it happen? Let's go. That's how they invest their money at the end.
Yeah. And that goes into another interesting question. Some of you folks, you have co-founders. Some of you are potentially looking for co-founders. But it is, to bring something to the market, extremely challenging to do it as a solo ship, that's out in the ocean and it's kind of there. And because you're doing disruptive technologies on top of that, it could be, something that's overwhelming. For the researchers who are out there who are listening to us, what are some tips or elements you consider when approaching co-founders? And what's your sort of decision process in saying, okay, now I think I need to have somebody who's going to be on board with me to go on this journey together?
Well, in my case, I met my co-founder through the first startup. So I think that worked really well, because we jumped into the mud right off the bat and started working on these super difficult things without really thinking about creating something between the two of us in the long run. So it was a great way to test the relationship. I would say that if you can work with potential co-founders before on a degree that is complicated and challenging enough, that will give you the most reliable information to decide if it's good to work with them or not. But in that case, I think I was lucky because, you know, we worked on this super cool, super sexy project, and it was fine. And then we realized, okay, we're working well together. Let's just keep going.
I would say complementary skills for sure. Someone that you would hang out with and spend a lot. Did I say a lot? A lot of time with. Yeah. If you don't see yourself spending a lot of time with that person, it's probably not the right person. Yeah, complementary skills. And also I would say find a project that you can work on together with some pressure and work at least, I would say 3 to 6 months together to really, really see how you behave in stressful situation. And if you have all those elements, you probably found the right person.
I think you guys named it all because those are the big ones. Since my brother is my co-founder, I would say one thing that we would add is passion. You have to find someone that has the same passion as you, because even though they're going to be taking care of maybe just the numbers and the business aspect, you want them as motivated to, you know, achieve that same goal for that same problem that you know, initially set out to solve. So yeah, passion-driven individual that can, you know, match your energy on a day-to-day basis. Because yes, 3 to 6 months of like hammering it out together and like going in the mud is super important, because then you see the real characters come out and you know how to deal with them, and that's going to be good for moving forward. You know, next hurdle, you'll be able to get through it a lot easier. So yeah, whatever you guys said, definitely some passion in there.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you know what? I forgot to mention, I also have a startup. I always forget. Every time like I introduce myself, I always forget I have a company, by the way, on the side as well. So V1 is the startup as well, and I have my company as well. So I'll talk from the co-founders from my company on the side. And like I'm gonna say, like, making sure that one of you has that long-term vision and that you're aligned in the vision. Like the alignment of the vision, it's key. Because very quickly when things go bad, if you don't have that alignment and vision, then it's very hard to make decisions, and that's when the relationships break. Yeah. So whether it's one of them being like, okay, I know you see it, I trust you, let's go, or okay, I think we're very much aligned, let's try to figure it out. Yeah. That's definitely important.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because you have like that sort of long-term vision of like, okay, this is the ultimate mission of what we're undertaking over here. And what I hear as well, which is interesting, is that having a specific, concrete, tangible problem to work on at the beginning kind of just sort of puts the pedal to the metal and just sort of say, okay, now it's time to go on something, and we're going to go on it, and we're going to see if anybody's going to fall off this bus. Well, it's going to fall off, but at least we'll know. And that sort of having a specific problem to work on allows you to see, okay, if this person is a good fit, or is perhaps not a good fit, and that's fine. You know, it's just, you know, taking the time to approach something when you do have a problem. And I think it's interesting with V1 as well, as we start working with partners within the ecosystem. Now that we've sort of identified a problem, it's a lot easier for other incubators and accelerators. It's a lot easier for the academic ecosystem and the entrepreneurial ecosystem to say, okay, like we need to get more innovations out. There's too much stuff that's staying on the shelf. This is a tangible thing now. So let's work together on something, as opposed to, oh, okay, well, we're all in the sort of same sandbox and maybe we should work on something because we're overlapping or we're competing or whatever. But having something tangible seems to bring action to that. So that's super interesting. Another point that you brought up, you know, the rapidity with which we have to make decisions. Speed, time is something that's super important. Jonathan was alluding to it in his interview. Talk to us about the difference between a notion of time from a researcher's point of view and that of an entrepreneur. I'd like to hear from both Dylan and Kevin on this one, as Jonathan did answer it. But what's for you the biggest difference in terms of managing your time coming from the academic world and then going into entrepreneurship?
Big thing that I had to learn in the process was, so time management, but also being extremely organized with what you need to prioritize first, second, and then make that list as long as you can. Because there's certain problems that need to be solved immediately, which is the fast decisions you need to make. And then there's some that you can sit down and let percolate and let them kind of sometimes figure themselves out, because now is not the time. Recognizing that is almost key, because you could spend a lot of time solving something that doesn't really affect your overall next 6 months, and then forget about those that are going to affect your next week. And so prioritizing and organizing your list is super important. And we've spent time, we've had moments where, developing a strategy, we spent 6 months developing it. Then we had to come to a decision, like, is this the right one to do right now or not? And then we said, no, we'll just stop everything and then just move on. And turned out like that was a safe way of approaching it, and it turned out to be good. So sometimes those decisions, you shouldn't make them too fast, because your hastiness could put you in a situation that you weren't prepared for. But also the flip side of that is also true. If you're not fast enough, well, the opportunity is going to go by and you won't be able to get on that journey anymore. So yeah.
I think that the PhD can be a little pretty slow. You can almost think of it as a 4-year or 5-year goal, whereas as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about 3-month goals. So it's a lot faster, yeah. But also it's you're accountable when you're a entrepreneur. So, or I would say more accountable, right? As a PhD student, it's your project and it's your degree, it's your graduation. But when you're an entrepreneur, maybe it's someone else's money, right? So that changes a bit of perspective of how sensitive time is and how precious of a resource and tool it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jonathan, you were mentioning, taking decision, knowing that you have limited knowledge. You don't have all the knowledge over there. What's your approach to sort of prioritizing what you should be working on, and how do you take those decisions?
Risk management, I would say.
Very fitting.
Yeah, very fitting. Not every decision is going to have the same impact if you're wrong. So you have to make that assessment, and based on that assessment, if you don't have all the information, but time is really the essence in that case, you need to move and you need to make the decision. And if you're wrong, you're going to learn from it, and you're just going to, improve over time or get more information and make a different decision. But you have to do that leap at some point. And the way to do that leap is to do a small risk assessment again. And I think this helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in for that question, or
I would say just a quick thing that I guess we learn throughout making a lot of decisions is sometimes the best decisions making not the worst decision, making something that is not as bad as what you thought it could be, and avoiding bad decisions is part of that good decision-making process. So yeah, bear that in mind. Not everything needs to be decided on at the moment, but not everything needs to be decided with the same vigorosity that you would do for something that you're confident in. You could always put it on the back burner and wait and become more informed to make a less wrong decision.
Yeah.
Lesser of two evils, essentially. Yeah.
100%. All right, well, we're just about wrap it up. Just one last question for all of you, including Diana. I think it would be interesting to hear. What inspires you to keep going? What inspires you guys to keep going in the face of adversity? Some of you are coming to the sunset of the program. I think it's a great opportunity to share with the other researchers who are in the room and on Zoom, and we're going to be watching this for posterity's sake. Just knowing about where you're at right now, maybe you can tell us a bit of context of where you're at, and then what inspires you to keep going for the next step in your journey. Anybody wants to take it?
So right now in our journey, we're at the pre-commercialization scale up of our biomass. So we're able to go from lab bench of 1 liter to 1,200 liters. And so we just, got that contract going. So hopefully in the new year, we'll be able to look at what does the pre-commercial scale up look like and those metrics. So that's a very important milestone for us. Moving forward, my personal motivation is that the problem is not solved. it needs solving, and not solving it is not an option. So just keep going.
So when I started the program, I didn't have a product yet. Now we do have a product, so we can do demos. And so when we do demos to people that actually have that problem that we're solving, it's to see their reaction and to see their eyes and to see that, oh, okay, there is a solution to this now. And this is a big element of motivation for sure, to get those signals then that you are in the right direction, that you are solving a problem that is important for them, and really see that that they see the value in what you're bringing.
Fantastic. What a feeling that must be. Beautiful.
My personal motivation is to see that something that I created with my own two hands is out there helping people. And where we're at right now, we're collaborating with a potential first customer. We're also pre-commercial, but we're in a second stage of validation. The next one would be pilot. So hopefully if that goes well, we'll be thinking about scaling up and shipping them the product soon. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hey, Kevin, Diana, do you want to
so much pressure.
take us home?
This is great. I think it's actually connected to what all of you guys said in a way, is like literally like this. So for me, I have my two babies. Well, I have four, I guess. V1, my two real ones, and my company. But in the context of V1 is I'm lucky that I get to stay on the ground and chat with all of these researchers and see all of the work, the infrastructures. I'm going to say the struggle to make changes, because we're talking about cultural changes and create new ways of enabling people, and to see what that comes out of it. So your guys' impact for me is like, okay, that's exactly what we want. Like, that's exactly, we want to make sure that people feel like, you know what, I have this path, I want to go take it. If the problem is not solved, I'm going to continue. If I know that I can feel that I'm having an impact, then I'm going to move forward. This is the stage, this is unlocking me, then this is why I should be doing it. It's like, it's literally that. And I think it's a privilege to get to see how you guys have grown. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And like hearing other people can like, oh wow, can I do that too? And the partners. Actually, this is interesting because I had a meeting with some of the centre d'entrepreneuriat, like entrepreneurial centers in the regions, where again, they don't maybe have a lot of resources like the big incubators in Montreal, notably, but they have that market in their universities, people that want to make changes. And they're like, you know what, now that I'm connecting with you, I know that we can work together and you can help me unlock them. That's what I want. And listening to them is like, yes, you got it.
Yes.
So that's what keeps me motivated, actually, and excited about it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Let's give them a big round of applause. So we also want to thank Concordia and Fourth Space. Thank you for all the support and love that you've given us. It's really a privilege to be here among you. And I could say that what inspires me is definitely documenting and telling the story of what we're doing here in Quebec. It's like really something special. And as we travel and we go elsewhere and we see how things are done in the world, we can also say that we're doing something innovative here in Quebec and in Canada. And wow, what a story it is to be. So we will continue to do this documentation. We will continue to share the stories among ourselves and learn from each other. And on that note, I wish you a very good holiday break. And we'll be back next year in 2024 with a new season for Zone Grise. So I want to thank the V1 team. I want to thank the District 3 team. I want to thank Concordia and everybody else in the audience who's been here to support us. Merci beaucoup. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And I'm just letting you know we're closing up the Zoom and the live stream now. Thank you, Terry, Deanna, Arthur, you're out there. Just for bringing this series to us and being able to help you make it happen. Okay, That's all. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for coming in.